Hello, my friends. My name is Jack Descartes, and this is Sentinel Circle. Thank you for being here today. I appreciate it. We're going to go right ahead into today's topic. Now, before I transition, this is going to be a very different video. This was sparked by a comment chain that happened under one of my more recent videos. And before I do this, I will admit, my standard policy is not to feed the trolls. I don't think this person is a troll per se, but I wanted to engage in this person to really understand where they were coming from, what their thoughts were, a lot of those things, simply because I will admit that the initial comment really caught me off guard. And the more I interacted with this person, the more I realized that I should bring this to you. And I understand, we all know the standard tropes, you know, feminism isn't about equality, but it's more about females ruling over men, that kind of stuff. I get that. But I wanted people to see really the depths of that well. So I'm going to go ahead and transition over. Now, for safety reasons, I did block out their name. I didn't delete their comments. I'm not going to tell everybody what video it was. I'm not going to tell anybody who this person was. I really do ask you not engage this person, not interact with this person, especially on my behalf. I can handle myself. I'm a big boy. But again, I just wanted people to understand where this is coming from. So let's go ahead and transition. So before I go on, let's explain some logistical things. On this channel, I have a very strict moderation policy. YouTube has an option to do either strict or basic, and I have the strict moderation on, and I'm sorry for the noises outside. We'll get through this. I'm not going to stop the video. I take a sip of coffee and see if that, well, no, it didn't die out. I recently learned, well, not recently, but when I initially started the channel, that when the moderation flags a comment, it stores it in the hidden portion of it. A lot of people don't actually check that. And I did find a couple of comments in there in the past, and I've unflagged them because they weren't offensive. I don't care about you guys attacking me or attacking the channel or all that stuff, as long as you guys are respectful when you do it. You know, simply because I do want the diversity of opinions on here. And I know that YouTube will sometimes delete comments and not even tell me whatever. That's fine. I do my best to kind of let people have their voice, even if, you know, and there have been very negative and offending comments directed towards me specifically. I'm sure some of them were in good faith, but most of them, you know, came off pretty insulting. I still allowed those, and in fact, I've even read them on the channel, simply because I do believe that critique and criticism are a very integral part to free speech. And by blocking that, it makes it seem like I'm trying to hide something, and I'm really not trying to hide something, you know. Yes, I will admit that even though I put my name on here, I do value my I don't want to say privacy. It's more just, I don't want people, because again, for some reason, when it comes to the internet, there's crazy people out there. They seek to destroy lives, you know? And that's why, you know, you really have to be careful out in the internet world, because it could bleed into your real life. And there have been instances where it has already happened. You know, that's why I don't believe in doxing, even though there are some people that probably should get it. You know, I'm not going to do that. Anyway, so again, I ask that you please do not attack this person. We're going to go ahead and start. And this was the first comment that I saw. And as you can see, there's a 5-day gap between when this person initially posted it and when I responded. that's what happened. Is that person's comment was blocked. I found it during my weekly perusal of the hidden section, and I brought it to life. And it says here, men should be trained to submit, especially men like you. And as you can see, this was an attack. So we'll go ahead and start right there. Submit, in my mind, means indentured servitude. It means you lose your rights as a human being. And I'm a very pro, because, I've seen what happens when a government can turn on someone. It is a very scary thing. And people have this natural desire to be free and all that stuff. So I strongly believe that if this person used the wrong word, and I suspect, I know I'm kind of going on and on and on about random stuff, but I strongly suspect that this person is not American. I strongly suspect this person isn't an English as a first language individual. And you'll see as the comments go on that there's certain things that kind of point me into that direction. I can't prove it, obviously. I don't seek to prove it. But I think that's what's going on here with some of the comments, because they were rather oddly worded. But anyways, so I think that maybe they didn't really mean submit. But I will say, I take everybody at their word. I don't, like, for example, the whole defund the police movement. You ask them, well, what does that mean? Well, they say, well, it means giving community policing a chance. No. They literally mean defund the police. When someone says, listen to what they tell you they are, you better listen to what they are telling you, and I think this person, it's possible there was a language barrier, but they said submit. I'm going to take them at their word. Okay. And there's one comment further on that kind of reinforces that belief. Anyway, so we'll go ahead. It says men should be trained to submit, especially men like you. I replied with, I'm sorry you feel that way. I wish you all the best. And I really do mean that. I don't wish ill or harm to anybody. I really want people to live their best lives. We live in a world that's already full of cruelty and evil, and I can't in good conscience contribute to that. So this is, the next comment is kind of why I suspect this person isn't a native English speaker. It says here, at Sentinel Circle, why are you sorry? Too entitled to feel your natural nervous system and desire? I don't understand what that means. Natural nervous system and desire. So then I replied back, no, I'm sorry you've been hurt so badly to have the opinions you have. I hope you I hope you find your peace one day. And I really do mean that, because the reason why people are radicalized into their corners is because they've been hurt by someone in some regard. And it may seem petty to another person. I'll give you a quick anecdote here. My father, I don't know how to say this gently, so I'm just going to come out this. He doesn't really like black people. And it's not just a boomer thing. He actually explained why he specifically doesn't like them. The story is he was in the army back in the 80s, and he was stationed in Europe. I'm not going to specify where. During a training exercise, where they were going to go out in the field, he bought Nutter Butter bars. He's a big Nutter Butters bar kind of guy. The little peanut butter cookie. He loves them. I can't stand them, but he loves them, and he says it always reminds him of when he was in the army. Anyway, so they're out in field training, and one of the guys in his platoon, who happens to be black, wants one of his cookies. And he says, no, if you wanted some, you should have bought some. Anyways, so the guy goes and snitches to the sergeant, and the sergeant also happens to be black, and basically says, to my father, hey, you need to share your cookies with this private. And my father was very angry with that. And granted, he didn't have the best life growing up, even though he lived in the Bay Area. He grew up in a trailer park, and there was some other issues going on, but he said that specific point was when he really, really, really did not like black people, because he felt that they would rather stand up for each other rather than stand up for what was fair and right. And I will say that racism often is misplaced, but it's situations like that, and what it boils down to, in my view, is there is kind of this, how do you want to say, this misalignment of values, right? This misalignment of values between races, between genders, that's what causes a lot of the friction, in my view. Now, again, outside observer, I could be completely wrong. Maybe it could be just like something as simple as they smell weird or whatever. I don't know. Okay. But when my father told me this story, it really made me, I understood it a lot better, because, he has said some pretty off-color things about people of different races. And, I try to be more accepting. And, there's the whole, racism is just pattern observation. Well, fair, stereotypes exist for a reason. I will say that there are, black people who are not that way. They work hard. And like I said, black people had some of the strongest family values until LBJ's whatever the program was, the Open Society or whatever it was. Some of the strongest marriage retention and all that stuff, and they have been devastated. And in fact, I feel sorry for the African American community more than anything else. But I do notice that Africans that come from Africa tend to have different values versus American Africans. There was that whole video recently where the one black American woman went to Africa and she was hating it and she wanted to come back, etc. There was that video that recently came out, and a lot of people were. I didn't personally go on that one simply because I didn't see it as a men's rights issue versus people were kind of poking holes at racism. And all. Anyways, point is I really do believe that let's take me for example. I'm not anti-woman. I don't want anybody to think that. I'm not anti-woman. I'm pro-man. There's a difference. I'm not trying to keep women down, but I'm more being an advocate and a champion of men, because we have lost that. Since doing this channel, I've noticed that there are even men who disparage maleness. We did that one video the other day where this guy wrote an opinion piece saying that men should just go away, and he is a man. And I'm like, does this guy not understand how the world works? Like, this dude's just up his own rear. So, but that's my point, though, is I've seen, I do feel that a lot of the anger comes from pain. And that was the whole point of that tangent, is I think this person has been hurt by men. That's why they feel the way they feel, just like we've more than likely been hurt by women. Therefore, that's how we feel. Anyways, so that's why I said, no, I'm sorry you've been hurt so badly to have the opinions you have. I hope you find your peace one day. Then this person replied, Sentinel Circle, who hurt you? Oh, sweetie, you are painfully unoriginal. And I'm assuming this person's a woman. This could be a man for all I know. But based on the username and based on the profile picture and all that stuff, I would assume it's probably a woman. But I noticed that women tend to not have screen names. They tend to use their real names and etc. I'm not gonna go too far into it. Anyways, then this person basically had a chain of replies because I was working and I couldn't reply immediately. And the next comment says, Sentinel Circle, my peace comes from not collapsing my nervous system. Thanks and you're welcome. Again, the whole nervous system thing. I'm guessing this person means nerves or something like that. And they're mistranslating nerves as nervous system. I don't know. It seems like this was kind of like, this person has a good grasp of the English language. They're actually using punctuation, I should say. But there's certain phrases that they're using that don't make sense to me. And to me, it seems like it's either they know enough to feel they don't need a translator or something along those lines. Anyways, so then the next one, which was Sentinel Circle, good luck finding a woman with a nervous system that is more receptive than yours, with a bunch of laughing emojis. And I will say that I have no desire for a woman. Thank you very much. And I say that in the next picture here. It says, nope, don't need one in my life. Thank you for your concern. Then they say, Sentinel Circle, because you'll never find a woman who is naturally more submissive than you in your entire human gene pool. And again, that's one of those phrases that sounds like it was a mistranslation or something like that. And to reply back to this comment, I don't care. I'm good. I don't need a woman in my life. I'm going to tell everyone here, and I'm sure everybody who is watching this video knows, but for those who are watching, okay, I understand the fear of missing out. You want to have a relationship because you're afraid that, maybe you're going to miss out on having kids, having loving romantic partner, that kind of stuff. But statistically speaking, we're already at half of all marriages end in divorce at this point, or half of children end up having divorced parents. Let me rephrase that, because there's a lot of people that don't even have kids and they end up getting divorced. You know what I mean? So again, I understand the concern. I know that there are some involuntary celibates who watch my videos, and I get it. There was a time where I was in your spot. I completely get it. In my 20s, I was feeling the exact same way, but in my 30s, I've realized, don't care, don't need it. It's nothing but a headache, And then, of course, again, the whole submissive thing, I don't know. Anyways, so then I replied, and this was the honest to God truth. I felt like this person was trying to pick a fight, so I called them out on it. I said, you did come in here looking for a fight, so obviously you are hurt. I've noticed that people who are looking for fights are the ones that are hurt, and just they are trying to lash out at the world because that's all they know. That's all they can do. That's all they know. They know that I'm not going to strike back or whatever because it hurts me directly if I strike back. So that's why they do that. So I replied back with this. I'll go ahead and read the comment again. You did come in here looking for a fight, so obviously you are hurt. I didn't seek a fight with you because I honestly didn't. I did not find this person randomly and just start poking a fight at them. They found me. And then I said, you should go find something that makes you happy, as being online and picking fights with those who did not bother you is what you find as entertainment. As I said, I hope you find your peace. That's really what it boils down to, because this person wants a fight. They're looking for a fight. And it's sad. It really is. It's I never understood the whole online troll mentality. Like, they actively, and this is kind of like a problem with every community out there, is there are people out there that are so small in real life that they have to go online and find others to go harass and bully. just to make themselves just feel just a little bit bigger. You know, feel like they're not the smallest piece of because it's possible they have a job they hate their home life. I mean, again, who doesn't? But they feel that they have to. In fact, there's one that's a notorious harasser out there. I'm not gonna say his name, but it's obvious that the dude's just got nothing going on in his life, and he feels that he has to bully everybody because he's got nothing else going on. And it's sad. It really is. I kind of, in a way, pity these people simply because, like, they literally have nothing else going on. You got a whole world of opportunity, and you feel that your life is more meaningful if you just go online and bully some people. Okay, well, you know what? Fine, go ahead and bully me. Like, I can block you. I can turn off the computer. Like, come on, what the hell? I don't have to put up with that, Like, fine, just go ahead and do it. Like, I got one hemorrhoid on my rear right now that's like tagging me in all of his comments, and it's like, okay, cool. He thinks I'm MGTOW, and I'm not MGTOW. Like, I've told people many times, I'm not a MGTOW guy. I want people to believe in what they believe and be free to practice what they believe in. And being MGTOW is one of those things that's like, hey, you want to do that? Fine. I mean, I probably live the tenets of it, but I don't actively call myself MGTOW simply because, like, there's other. I don't believe in isms. I don't believe in labels. It's just the guy's weird. I don't know. Anyways, and so then the next comment was at Sentinel Circle, peace comes with matriarchy. And this one was, again, it just seems like this person is so radicalized in believing that women are the greatest things since sliced bread, and they don't realize that women are just as bad as men, and in some cases worse. I mean, like, how many times have I, or not I, but we, how many times have we read stories about a mother who takes all the kids out into the lake and, dunks them under one by one until the bubbles stop coming up, just to spite the father? Like, I've seen stories like that, and we got stories now that women are abusing children at schools, often case sexually. There have been cases of women who've kicked little kids and beaten little kids at, like, daycares and stuff like that. Like, women are freaking horrible. Not to say that there aren't men who are horrible too, and in fact, I would say that women are worse because they know that they can get off lighter than men. So again, this person thinks that, like, if women ruled the world tomorrow, it would be the greatest thing ever. And no, like, there are people out there that want what others want. In fact, I think the only thing that I will say about men that I can't say about women is men will use force, whereas women will use subterfuge to get what they want. And I appreciate that as a man, because then I know who my enemy is. Whereas women will use deception to achieve their goals. And a lot of times they didn't earn it. They take what they don't earn, and then we end up in a situation where everybody suffers because of it. Anyways, so my reply to the whole peace comes with matriarchy is violence is a human condition. Any matriarchal society will just be as violent as any patriarchal society. Women can be very ruthless and evil just as any man. Having blind faith in a gender is just like having blind faith in anything. It always leads to ruin, and I strongly believe in that. Always question everything. And your comment here comments, plural, comments here have done more damage than I ever could do. You just proved to pretty much any red pill, MGTOW, or any other man who was on the fence what people like you really want, which is full submission, which means indentured servitude. This is why men are all checking out, because they rather let everything fall apart than to live in shackles. I want to thank you for showing my audience the truth here. And again, I want to thank this person. This person really did show what these people really do believe in, and in a way, it's kind of happening already. Yes, men are paid more money for some of the labor that they do, but they're still doing very dangerous work. Men are putting their lives on the line for good pay for their families. And a lot of times the families don't appreciate it. Like you got the one, there's this famous photo that keeps going around online. It's this coal miner that takes his son to basketball games, and like he doesn't have a chance to shower or get dressed or anything like that. He's got to get off work immediately, go pick up his son and take him to. But when you really think about it, like coal mining is one of the most dangerous professions out there. And those men, God bless them. We need men to do those kinds of jobs, but like, you really look at what they're doing, it is very dangerous work. I couldn't do it. In fact, the top 10 most dangerous jobs out there, like 9 out of 10 of them are male-dominated industries, and I think logging or fishing is like the biggest one. I don't remember. But like, that's really where we're at right now. I would love for women to go do those jobs. I would love it. I want them to see what it's like to be a man on a daily basis. I want them to put their lives on the line every single day to provide for their families in the way that men do, day in and day out. Anyways, so sorry, I don't know why every single time I record, my nose gets itchy, and I think it's because of the mustache here. I don't know. Anyways, let's continue on. Whoa, hang on here. I think I missed a comment here. We'll continue on. And there was another reply. I don't know what I replied to, because I got to be honest with you. YouTube comments really do not do a good job of organizing threads. I kind of wish they would fix that. This is not the platform for a conversation like this, but it says, not my desire. I'm imagining that it's, again, talking about finding a relationship, something like that. It says, not my desire. I just don't like dealing with the drama a relationship brings. And this is the honest to God truth. My life is very simple. The moment a woman gets involved, it becomes very complex. It has nothing to do with submission. I can do anything I desire as long as I have the time or money. I don't really want to alter my plans to accommodate someone else. That's my personal choice. If you feel a relationship is based on someone submitting, then that's fine. Good luck finding someone willing to do that. Not to say that there aren't any men out there who wouldn't, and this is, again, a sad reality that we live in. There are some who would, and I'll be right here ready to embrace them when they eventually realize their mistakes and leave. All men are welcome here. And again, these are things that I believe full-throated, with all my heart. I believe these things. This is where it starts getting a little out there. And I think that I was dealing with a language barrier here without realizing. Again, this person's English is a little too good. With the occasional loss in translation that I expect from someone who's not a native English speaker. Anyways, it says here, LOL, the majority of men want to submit. Last time I checked, the majority of men don't want to submit. And the ones who admit to themselves that they do will pay cold hard cash for it. I mean, yeah, pay pigs exist. I will not disagree there. If you want to corrupt men's natural sexual desire, go for it. That's literally the patriarchy's playbook. Makes you willing cannon fodder. That is that one comment is just all over the freaking place. I don't even know where to start. So let's go ahead and break it down. The majority of men want to submit. No, that's not true. Okay? And again, this is why I think they don't really mean submit. I think they mean something else. But it could also be ideology is a little too strong with this one. And the ones who admit to themselves that they do will pay cold, hard cash for it. I think she means, in this case, she's probably talking about like things like OnlyFans, prostitution, a lot of fetish stuff, that kind of stuff. You know, again, I don't know. I don't want to speculate on what this. I firmly don't believe in putting ideas in someone's mouth. You know, let them tell you what they mean. You do not assume. But anyways, I will agree with you here. I will agree with this person here. Let me put it this way. Oh, sorry, I went a little too far ahead. Let's first go to the next part, then I'll tell you what I'm trying to say here. If you want to corrupt men's natural sexual desire, go for it. That's literally the patriarchy's playbook. So let's take that. So, patriarchy in the traditional sense. Here, let's first define what patriarchy means. Okay, that's the best way to do this. So let me pull out my handy dandy telephone so that way I don't do this on the screen and screw that up. Jesus Christ, I'm looking right at it. Patria, patriarchy. Okay. So according to Wikipedia, and again, Wikipedia is not a good source, but patriarchy is a social system in which positions of authority are primarily held by men. The term patriarchy is used in both anthropology to describe a family or clan controlled by the father or eldest male or group of males, and in feminist theory to describe a broader social structure in which men as a group dominate society. So, I will concede the point that we do live in a patriarchal society. Now, I know what I'm about ready to say is probably going to be very controversial. It is not in men's benefit to live in a patriarchal society. It is not in a woman's benefit to live in a matriarchal society. What do I mean by that? What I mean is it's a system, a hierarchical system, where both sides have an elite, really, and that's what I mean here, is an elite that control everything. And I strongly believe in you know, the best person for the job should rise, okay? These people, and it's on both sides, it's not just our system and this theoretical system, both sides of the argument would put an elite in where, you know, a small group of families would control everything, okay? And their descendants, even though they did not earn it in any regard, their descendants would continue the system as is, okay? They would put us through misery, us through hell, just so they can make 0.25% more in profit. You know, we see it on a daily basis, okay? I've worked at companies that have been run by men. I've worked at companies that have been run by women. They both suck, you know, and I think anybody here would agree with that. That being stated, we're now seeing a world where women are starting to dominate, and we've seen what that looks like. And what I mean by what that looks like is the Nordic countries specifically have been mostly overturned and be controlled by women, and they're having a lot of societal problems that they never had before. Same thing with Central Europe is slowly becoming that way, and Western Europe. Eastern Europe still has not. And I think what's going to happen is because Eastern Europe's the way they are, I think Western Europe thinks that they can kind of lower their guard. And I think where a lot of this is going to happen is we're going to see a rise in extremist attacks across Western Europe. We're already seeing that, but it's going to be a lot worse, and it's going to get to a point where it can no longer be ignored. Like we hear stories about grenade attacks and machete attacks every single day, and it's never covered. But like the whole Ariana Grande concert situation in France a couple of years ago, that was so mass casualty that nobody could ignore it. One of the things that I learned when I was in my my media classes was, and anybody who knows journalism knows the phrase, if it bleeds, it leads. Newspapers, news organizations in general, they can only hold the message for so long until an event is so big that the potential for profit outweighs the money that they would get from their benefactors. That's why you have these occasional leaks coming from the news before it just seems like they all kind of get their marching orders and then they all follow the same script. That's what happens. And I think that, like I said, when it gets to a point where the potential for profit outweighs the money that they would get from the benefactors, that's when you're going to really start seeing the truth. Would that happen relatively soon? I don't know. The problem is you have the Fifth Estate currently. The Fifth Estate is overtaking the Fourth Estate when it comes to media. And it's at a point now, I mean, we've seen with the last three elections. Yeah, about the last three elections, not 2020, but 2008 and 2012, then 2016, and then this most recent election, 2024. We saw what happens when alternative media really gets involved, and it's shaping the narrative in a way that traditional media just can't cope with anymore. They've lost a lot of power. And I think as like my generation gets older and new generations grow up with the internet, that's going to slowly shift as well. That's why there's such a push for censorship laws, because they can, censorship can basically block out undesirable voices. And that's kind of where all this is going to go, is they're going to try and get rid of undesirable voices. And, even though it's going to seem like they're not real news, they essentially will be extensions of real news. I could be wrong, though, but that's kind of how I see it, as someone with a slightly deeper understanding than the average Joe about what media looks like behind the scenes. Anyways, back to this comment here where it says the majority of men want to submit. This, and I pointed this out, so I'll read the next comment just to kind of explain the contradiction here, because there was a contradiction that came up. And if you guys, saw it, definitely let me know. It says here, at the start of this discussion, you said men should be trained to submit. Now you said the majority of men want to submit. And this is, again, the truth here. What do they mean? And this is, again, why I don't think I'm talking to a native English speaker. I seem to be confused because these comments now contradict each other. Why would you have to train men who are already willing? Your first comment seemed to imply that men aren't willing to submit and should be trained, or really you mean conditioned. Maybe take a few moments, calm down, and explain in English what your position here is, because I'm sure anyone reading would like to know with certainty. And again, I know it came off rather aloof. Well, aloof is not really a good word for it. I mean, I will say I went for the jugular on this one because even I was rather confused when I saw this past comment. The majority of men want to submit because again, the first comment was men should be trained to submit. So which is it? You shouldn't have to train someone if they're already willing. You know, and again, in my view, again, okay, let me take a pause here. Organize my thoughts. The issue is words mean something. Okay? And that's why I constantly bring up the textbook definition, because the problem that I've seen with a lot of arguments online is because people don't agree to the true definition of the words. Okay? So for example, trained. Trained, in my view, means conditioned. Okay? That may not be what they mean. You know, trained could be taught. Trained could mean repetition. Trained could mean a lot of things. But based on the fact that they're saying men want to submit, my understanding initially was trained as in conditioned. Okay? That's why I worded it the way. I'm not saying that that's what this person meant, but that's what it implied. Okay? So, the next comment that came after that, which was clarification. Men may naturally desire submission to a powerful woman, but all social conditioning makes them narcissistic and entitled. It's not a contradiction. It would be better to say men should be untrained from their ego inflation so that they can accept love and guidance. Is that better? I'm glad for that clarification. I really am, because now I actually agree with this person here. Social conditioning does make, and it's not just men, it's everybody, narcissistic and entitled. Right? I mean, I strongly believe that a lot of societal ails came from social media. You know, everybody wants to be a star. Everybody can be a star. You know, I've heard, and I'll give you a quick anecdote. My nose is itchy. I'm sorry. I know it looks really horrible just going the entire time. There have been stories that I see online all the time of these people who own these Instagram accounts, and it's only like a couple, like tens of thousands of people. They aren't even like 100,000 followers. And I will say a lot of them probably bought the followers because they're that up their own rears. But they go to these restaurants and they're like, I would love to do a review of your restaurant. You know, to kind of, and I'll do this if you give us free food. That's how up their own rears they are. You know, they think that they got tens of thousands of followers, which out of a whole world of 8 billion people, that's a small drop in the bucket. Let's be real. Is it 8 billion? Yeah, it's a little over 8 billion now. You know, the United States is what, almost 400 million people. Like, even if all those people were American, which they probably aren't, you know, like the giving free food is not worth being posted on Instagram, you know. And here's the other thing too, is like, as long as you got a semi-attractive woman on an Instagram, you'll get a bunch of Indians starting to subscribe saying show Bob and Vagine. You know, like, come on. Let's get out of our rears and really think this one through here, okay? Anyways, but back to the original point here, which was the conditioning. I do believe that social conditioning is a factor in what's going on here. Okay. In order to, because look, here's the thing. What's the difference between normal life and a cult? Let's ask that question. Really, there isn't much of a difference. The only difference between the two, I would say, is probably what someone dictates. Let's take, okay. I talk about cults all the time simply because I'm fascinated that people can go into it. So let's take Jim Jones. Okay. Jim Jones, before he became known as the guy that forced everybody to drink the Flavor Aid, not the Kool-Aid, Flavor Aid, because they were too cheap to buy Kool-Aid. They had Jim Jones not gone down that whole road, and that road was not just something that happened. It really started when he was a young man. He wanted the power and control. He didn't care how he got it. And he ended up getting it by being a reverend, right? But the man, I will admit, and a lot of people gloss over this fact, is that before he did this, in 1950s Illinois, no, it was Indiana, pardon me, not Illinois, Indiana. They were segregated, and he went around using the power of his church to force desegregation in a lot of these places. The man was a huge civil rights champion before he believed that the world was going to end in nuclear war, moved everybody out to California, then moved everyone down to, what was it, Brazil? No, it was Guyana. Yeah, Guyana. And then forced everybody to drink the Kool-Aid. The man did a lot of good things for the community. Now, granted, his intentions may not have been so altruistic. He was about the power. And by using the power of the group, he went and forced places to desegregate and all that stuff, which at the time was very radical. We sit there and say, oh, desegregation's good and all this. Well, you got to remember back then, a lot of people thought that desegregation was anti-American, So I'm not going to get into the whole argument. We are products of our time. A lot of people sit there and say, well, if I was around in 1940s Germany, I would not join the National Pizza Party. No, you would have, because everybody else and their mother and their brother was doing it. You would have joined just as easily as they did, and then you would have played stupid once the war was over. Okay, that's just the human condition. You would never be the rock in the river. You would be the water molecule in the river going with the rest of the water molecules. Okay, rest of the water droplets. All right, that's just how human beings are. They have to be part of the group, and because of that psychology, it's easily manipulated. Okay, that's why the whole Agent K in Men in Black sits there and says a person can be reasonable, but people are stupid. And that's the honest to God truth. One person can be reasoned with. One person can be talked to like a human being, but groups of people, once they get into a frenzy, there's no stopping them. It's just animal nature. I don't know. I'm not a psychologist. Anyways, where was I? The next comment I will say was nice. This person says, I will give you this much, darling. Women still have plenty of their own patriarchal conditionings. No, it's singular. Conditioning, pardon me. And most are not psychologically prepared for true leadership. Hypergamy and sexual withholding are not empowering. They are just how to win at patriarchy. I can't blame them, to be honest. But the math will never equal power. And again, this is where I started to really agree with this person. And I'm not saying that I agree fully with this person. But adults, we can disagree and still find points of common agreement, I should say. Um, the whole thing that women still have plenty of their own patriarchal conditioning, and most are not psychologically prepared for true leadership. I do agree with you there. And a lot of that I would imagine is from the lack of fatherhood. Women suffer from the lack of fathers in the house just as much as men does. But I think it impacts men more because we need a strong male role model to understand what being a strong man is, whereas a woman, um, they get strong women in their lives a lot easier. Not to say that that's 1% true or all that stuff, but yeah, there's a point there. And then the whole hypergamy and sexual withholding are not empowering. I also agree with you there. Same thing with the abundance of sexual promiscuity, being promiscuous. Let's put it that way. It's not empowering. If anything, it's sad, and it just makes you look, nasty. But again, this person brings up a good point. This is how to win at patriarchy. That's really what it boils down to, is they're trying to beat men by using these tactics. It's like the 4B movement. We haven't even heard of that after a couple weeks when Big Bad Orange Man got elected. I'm using their language, not my language. So don't at me. But 4B movement, it lasted for like 2 weeks and then that disappeared. It just seems like there's this giant overreaction and then it just goes quiet. It honestly, you know what it seems like to me? It just seems like it's the political equivalent of throwing feces at the window and seeing what sticks. That's really what it seems like half the time. That's why it's so quick, because once they latch onto something, it lasts for a whole season, right? But until it latches on, they go on to the next thing, They got to let some of these elements breathe a little bit. Anyways, so I reply back, see, that much I can agree with, or agree there. Social conditioning does make men and women both narcissistic and entitled, and I did mention that earlier. That's what I'm trying to do here, which will take time. Once the conditioning is broken, men will be much more free to take back their strength. And that's, again, what I'm trying to do here. I'm trying to get men to take back their strength. Weak men is how we got into this situation, but you want men to submit to a woman, which I feel won't happen once the social conditioning is broken. What you see currently is a symptom of the problem, which is men checking out fully from everything within society. It's a natural reaction to how society treats men who want to just live their lives in peace. If a man wants to submit to a woman, that's his choice, and that's fine as long as the choice is available to make. But if you want to spend time really trying to understand men and their issues, you would see a lot of men are angry and frustrated because they are not free to live their lives as they see fit. We just want to work a job that pays us enough with as little interference as possible from those who seek to leech from us. I'm sure you've seen the videos on TikTok of people who show what they are buying with EBT and other benefits. I earn, and this again is me talking, I earn a good living, but even I can't afford all the things that some are buying. This is indeed a men's issue, but it's also a taxpayer issue. So again, this gets a little out there. I agree with some of the points, but not all of them. This person wrote, this is a result of end-stage patriarchy / capitalism. I'll get back to that. I have written a much longer response, but it disappeared and I'm not retyping it. If you are listening, whoever you are, again, not saying the name, write it down on the notepad and then copy and paste it over. That's the best way I've found. And for anybody who's trying to write a comment on YouTube, write it down on your notepad in your handy dandy phone here, and then copy and paste it over, because I can't begin to tell you how many times I type something out and then someone calls me and I lose all that. And it's like, what a kick in the groin. One thing I will say here is that males who are alphas actually have feminine cognition, and all they offer the gene pool is violence. The true masculine is a man with extreme left-brained lateralization. And again, this is why I don't think I'm talking to a native English speaker. I know I keep harping on that, but it's kind of hard to have a conversation when there's a language barrier present. Trust me, I know. I can tell by looking at you, men like this actually have value in the gene pool and society. However, they are not natural leaders. Left-brain men are natural community builders because of their innate sympathy and ability to mirror. And I will agree with this person wholeheartedly with that characterization. I don't know if it's left brain versus right brain. I know that whole left brain right brain thing is such a gross underestimation of what the brain's actually doing. But that being stated, this person did point out that I myself am not a natural leader, and I would be the first one to admit that. I am a community builder. Again, would fully agree with that. I do have a lot of sympathy for people around me. That is actually one of the things that I would call one of my faults. You know, I try my hardest to harden my heart to people and their situation. There have been instances like my sympathy towards, like, for example, the homeless over the years has been rather hardened. And it's simply because I don't like being taken advantage of. And when I see a person come up to me asking for a buck for a soda, my sympathy's not really there. Where I'm sympathetic, and I've told certain people this, if you want sympathy, you have to show that you're willing to, you know, work your way out of the situation rather than asking for a handout. You get much more sympathy from that situation. So when I see someone saying, you know, looking to earn a living on the side of the street, I help them out by giving a business card. Or I help them out saying, hey, you know, call me and I'll see what I can do and get you going. You know what I mean? That kind of stuff. But I will admit that my field trip, and I keep referencing the field trip that I did with Sam Fisher. I really need to do that video because I've tried doing it 3 times now, and it comes off as like I'm stroking my own ego, and that's not what I'm trying to do. But homelessness, true homelessness, not the faux homeless that you see, but true homelessness, that is a very difficult hole to dig out of, and modern systems have made it that much more harder. I will say that, you know, we've talked about, and I don't mean to bring up politics again, but the whole Obama phone thing. I will agree that having a phone is becoming so essential in our society that not having one is actually detriment. Same thing with internet connection. I mean, it's at a point now where you can't even walk into 90% of these places and apply. You have to apply online. You know, and obviously if you're homeless, you don't have access to things like, you know, electricity and a computer unless you go to like a library. You know, but when I go to the library and I see all those homeless people in the library and they're just they're watching YouTube all day, I kind of don't have sympathy there. So I don't know. The ability to mirror, that's an interesting observation. I don't think I have that ability to mirror what's going on. But who knows? I don't know. I don't know. So then I reply back, I couldn't find your comment, so it wasn't blocked by the filter I put on. I'm sorry about that. I appreciate your compliments and comments. I will agree that alpha men do have issues, and we'll get back to that here in a second. I firmly believe it's a symptom of lack of confidence. Men who lack confidence tend to either A, retreat into themselves and become neats, or B, They become hyper aggressive because they can't handle the shattered worldview. It can lead to ego death. True confidence show men they don't need to be either. It's like one of my heroes, Bruce Lee, he would say, "Be water, my friend." You look at Bruce, and he has the sense of confidence in himself. Or, pardon me, he has this sense of confidence in himself. He isn't trying to be this macho man. In fact, he is very unassuming. But the moment he is ready, it's a switch that flips. He becomes ready and one with himself, a lesson we all can be. So, the whole point of the alphas. So, let's first start with, what is an alpha male? An alpha male, in my view, is one. It's kind of. Let me put it this way: if you got to say you're an alpha male, you're not an alpha male. Let's first start there, because already you've lost that battle. It's like, it's I didn't watch the series because of the ending sucking, but oh god, what's the J.R.R. Martin or George R.R. Martin novel? It was the show on HBO. I can't think of the name right now. It's killing me, and I know someone's gonna be like, "You're on the tip of the tongue." Anyways, there is one scene, and I've seen it on YouTube, where he tells the kid, "If you have to say that you're the king, you're not the king," and that's really what it boils down to. Is when you have that aura of being a true man, a true leader, whatever, the world knows it. You carry yourself different. You have this sense, in a way. It's very hard to describe, but once you see it, you know it. They walk into the room and everyone quiets and they're looking at them, and it's not an awkward situation. It's actually very intentional. They're not like the last person to walk in, but damn near close. And like I said, it's being an alpha. If you have to say it, you're not an alpha, but the point of being the alpha is like, they are not confident. Like Andrew Tate. I don't mean to bring up Andrew Tate, but this is probably the best example of this. Andrew Tate, yeah, he's into MMA. Yeah, he does all this stuff. He kind of strikes me as a man who is not confident. He got good. Like he shows the symptoms of a man who's been on juice, because he's got the male pattern baldness, and he's got a fairly weak chin. I'm not to say that he didn't work for it. He still did MMA. He still has a record with the actual system. I'm not sitting there saying that he's not a real man. He is. It's just it just seems like he's overcompensating for something. And I don't know what that is. It just, there's an overcompensation there. It's the same. Like I live in Texas, but I saw this in California too. Believe it or not, you got the guys that drive the raised up truck, and it says Second Amendment. We the people on the back, and it's got American flags everywhere. And I mean, there's nothing wrong with living in your country. Don't get me wrong. I'm very proud to be an American, but like, I'm not going around with a raised truck and all that stuff. And then like they get out of the car and they look exactly how you think, which is the hat with the wraparound sunglasses and the Black Rifle Coffee Company shirt, or the shirt with the American flag on the side. And it's like, stop being a stereotype, because they have no personality, and if you go onto their social media, they probably follow the same 50 freaking people, like, like Alex Zedra, because she's apparently hot and she likes guns, and, basically just a walking stereotype. I don't believe in being a stereotype. Be yourself. If you happen to like Barbies, by all means, like Barbies. You know, don't let anybody tell you you're less than a man because you happen to like Barbies. I'm not saying anything about myself. But like, there's so many people out there that are so afraid of what other people that they will never see ever again thinking of them, and it's sad. It really is sad. Like, if I hate to say it, but in my view, furries are more men than the guy in the raised truck, because at least the furry has the confidence to go out in the fursuit and the diapers. That's a true confidence I'll never have. I know I'm being extreme here, but that's the honest to God truth. Is, you know, people who do that have a confidence about them that, like, I mean, I'll never have. I got to give them credit. You know, but I really do believe that everybody should live that mantra of be water. You know, be willing to go with the flow, but at the same time, you know, water has a strength all in itself. You know, water can be gentle and calm, and water could be probably one of the most powerful forces you've ever experienced. Anyways, let's continue on. I think there's one more comment here. Yeah, right here. At Sentinel Circle, Bruce Lee and all males who show that level of spiritual attunement have right brain lateralization. Alpha and Sigma males have feminine cognition, meaning right-brained cognition. Masculine cognition is left brain. Engineering, analysis, accounting, closed systems with defined parameters. The right brain is holistic, somatic, open-ended, emotionally intelligent. It is also somatically dominant. Alpha presence is a function of a right brain nervous system. Again, what's with the nervous system? What gender owns the right brain? Women. Feminine thinking excels at leadership. Most women are alphas. Alpha females have a lot in the same social ego problems as alpha males. Again, I do firmly agree with this person, but they do represent the majority of women. Personally, I have extreme right brain lateralizations and the holistic pattern recognition that goes along with this. The true polarity should be between extremely right-brained women and extremely left-brained men. This actually creates a world of gentleness, care, empathy, sensuality, and inclusivity. I have a tremendous amount of love for left-brained men and sympathy for how they are treated, but most are deeply traumatized by patriarchy and cannot access their real strengths. And again, I know a lot of people are going to sit there and tear this person apart for that last sentence, but I actually agree with this person. I do firmly believe that the patriarchy, and I'm saying patriarchy as in male-dominated systems, have destroyed men just as much as they've destroyed women, and they cannot access their real strength because, again, we are conditioned not to. And that was the last comment. There were other comments underneath this, but it was other people engaging with this person, and I'm not gonna go into that. So let me fade back here and give my final thoughts here. So I'm not picking on this person. I don't want anybody to think that this person's wrong or evil or whatever. If anything, I actually agree with this person towards the end. I really do think that if this person and I sat down and really talked about some ideas, I think we would actually find out we would have more in common than we realize. That being stated, I don't fully agree with the whole submission thing. And it was stunning to see that. But I firmly believe that this person really does believe that men should submit. And what I mean is, again, submit indentured servitude towards women. Even though I know one of their comments clarified it. Let me go back here. It was Men may naturally desire submission to a powerful woman, but all social conditioning makes them narcissistic. No, that wasn't it. It was Oh, I can't. They did clarify it, and they did say that it wasn't indentured servitude. It was more submission, as in accept the power of women, which women do have a strength and power. The problem is they suffer from the same problems that men suffer. It's just the symptoms show up differently. Like in my previous job, I had a manager for a bank. I'm not going to tell you which bank it was, but she was a notorious see you next Tuesday. And I could tell, she's overweight. That has a lot to do with it. Women who are overweight tend to be less or more self-conscious than women who are not as overweight. That's one. And two is she felt that she was being judged on things that were not in her control, which, we all are. Like, she's not unique or different in that regards. I'm judged at my job for things that I have no control over. That's just life. And in fact, she did get demoted, but she then regained her position back because who else was going to take that position? That's just the nature of this specific bank. But she screamed, like, just by looking at her, you could tell she had zero confidence in herself. But she took it out on everybody. In fact, everybody that worked at not just the one branch that she was the manager of, but the branch in town, they both mocked her behind her back because of how much of a pill she was. Sorry, my nose is itchy again. So, like I said, women suffer from lack of confidence just as much as men do. And I think what it boils down to is fear. I think men and women have a lot of fear of which they can't control. And our society has been structured in a way that we can't control a lot. Again, I don't mean to bring politics into this, but the whole Daniel Penny situation in New York probably was the biggest point to this situation, which is, if you guys don't know, Daniel Penny was a passenger on the subway, and there was a guy on there. He's getting a little, according to the story, again, I wasn't there, but according to the story and according to witnesses, the guy was, homeless. He's getting a little crazy. He was saying that he was going to unalive people. And Daniel Penny walked up to him, put him in a choke just to calm him down. Well, that gentleman eventually ended up passing away. I don't know if it was because of drugs or if it was actually because of Daniel Penny. I don't know. But Daniel Penny was completely, dragged through the mud. He was labeled as racist. He was labeled as a bigot. He was labeled as all these different things. And the problem with that is that was by design. They don't want people to defend themselves. And that was the whole point of the Manchester cop video last week, was the powers that be don't want us to be able to defend ourselves. They don't want the police to do that job either. Their whole point is to keep us afraid. Why? Well, again, if we are easily afraid and if we have zero confidence, we are easily controlled. I firmly believe that that's what it boils down to, is control. The problem is these people think they can control society, but as we've seen time and time again, the moment you introduce the human element into any plan like that, your plan is just as good as gone. We have people who live their entire lives in comfort, who feel they know better than the common man. And that's the inherent problem, is they fail to understand that there's more of us than there are of them. And all it takes is one slip up for them to realize, what could really happen. All I have to do is point to the French Revolution. So, with that stated, I do appreciate what this person did. I know at first I was kind of digging into them, but like I said, the more I reflected on it, the more I really thought about it. That one, it took a lot of bravery because I ended up making this video, and I decided to make this video since that first comment. But I did not expect to make this specific video. I thought I was going to make a whole video on male submission towards women and all that stuff. But what I ended up making a video on, and what I ended up coming to as a conclusion, is there's actually more in common between us than we realize. Now, I know there are some that are just so dyed in the wool that you could be a man and be the enemy. Nothing you can think or say or do is going to change that. But this person, I think, is a reasonable individual. I know some of their ideas are a little unhinged, but I know my ideas to someone like that person may be a little unhinged, and that's probably what spawned that comment, was that person thought I was a little unhinged. They could have gone about it in a different way, but maybe that was an attempt to get my attention, which it certainly did. I don't know. But radicalism in any direction is probably the worst thing in the world. And I will admit that, people who watch my channel are probably fairly radicalized. I mean, fine, dandy, I don't want to see radicalism. I don't want to see people take extremes, but I know that we live in a very extreme society. Hyper individualism is a form of extremism. And I have certain ideas and beliefs that some people might find extreme, and that's fine. I'm not going to sit there and say you will live my way or else. All I'm saying is this is probably just a better way. Anyways, I hope you guys enjoyed that. I know it was a little rambly and a little out there, but again, I wanted to bring that to you because I thought that was a little interesting. It was a very interesting conversation or comment thread that I had there. And I hope that person, again, I'm not going to reference their name for security reasons. I know that if people go looking, they'll find them real fast. I ask that you not harass this person. But to the person that I'm referencing, don't be a stranger, please. I like the diversity of opinions. Okay? I hope to speak to you again in the future because I really do think that we do have a lot more in common than we realize. Anyways, if you enjoyed this video, please like and subscribe and have a good day.